Hey guys, Haz here at Shield K9, and today we are going to be talking about how to correct your dog's behavioral problems. So 2 weeks after the release of our Elite Off-Leash Obedience course, I checked in with you guys and I found out that a lot more of you than I initially thought are struggling with behavioral issues, specifically reactivity towards other dogs and people. And of course that's inhibiting your progress through the obedience training. So I heard you guys loud and clear, and I am now working on our behavior training course. This is the course to help people resolve the common behavioral issues that a lot of you are facing. I was going to initially do this at my leisure. I have decided to move forward hastily to get this out to you as soon as possible because I see a lot of you guys are struggling. And I'm going to be giving you guys a number of strategies to address reactivity and other common behavioral issues that you guys are facing. So this, to my knowledge, is going to be the most comprehensive video on how to actually and properly correct your dog in existence. And the reason why is, hey, it's a controversial subject. There's a lot of myths around this topic. There's a lot of false information being spread about this topic from people that in most cases they don't know, but they're just making videos or talking about it, or people that do know better but they don't want to share the truth for a variety of reasons. I am going to give you guys exactly what I do. I'm not going to hold anything back. I'm not going to tell you guys to do anything, right? And that's right off the hop. I'm not telling you to do any of this stuff I'm talking about. I'm talking about what I do, and if it helps you, it helps you. Okay? So, it's really important to understand a couple of things. When you're dealing with an unwanted behavior, there are two approaches, or a combination of approach to take with to address that behavior. Number one, management. Okay? So if you manage the dog in a certain way, the problem becomes a lot less likely. So for instance, if I have a dog who's fear aggressive towards people, all right? And I say, okay, no strangers from here on out are going to touch this dog unless absolutely necessary, bad or whatever. Well, now that management strategy is going to greatly reduce his stress and is going to greatly reduce the likelihood that somebody strange to him is going to be bit. Okay? Example number two, I have a dog who likes to pick up socks from the ground and he eats the socks. It's a common problem, right? And then of course he has to go to the vet and have the socks surgically removed. If I say, I'm no longer going to allow this dog to wander my home freely, well, now I fix that problem. I'm going to situate this dog. He's going to be on his place, or he's going to be in his crate if I'm not home. If I'm home, he's going to be on his place. He is no longer wandering the house, picking things up off the ground, and then I have to struggle to get those things back from him before he wolfs them down and ingests them, and then of course we're in that $5,000, $6,000 surgery depending on where you are, right? So that management strategy is going to greatly reduce the incidences of the unwanted behavior. So management's really important. But there's also the other side. The other side is punishers. Punishers create a reduction and ultimately, when performed properly, a complete extinction within a specific behavioral contingency that the dog offers. Okay, so if your dog bites the leash, if your dog's going after other dogs on the walk, if your dog's jumping on you, anything that you don't like, if you apply punishers properly to that specific behavior, you're going to remove that behavior, or at least create a reduction in that specific behavior. Because what is a punisher, right? It's something, and specifically positive punishment is what I'm talking about here, if you want to get technical and scientific, right? It's something that the dog deems as aversive. Doesn't matter what you think it is. The dog will tell you, did you punish him or not? If the dog is showing a suppression in his behavior, right? If he's showing an immediate reduction or complete extinction within that specific behavior that you're punishing, then you've punished him. If he's getting worse, you haven't punished him. You tried to punish him, but you didn't. And that's something a lot of people do not understand. There's negative reinforcement and then there's punishment. And a lot of people, even when they mean to be in punishment, they're actually negatively reinforcing. So I'll give you an example. The most common example I see. Dog's on a leash. He's on a prong collar. There's another dog coming. He pulls into the prong collar and begins to lunge and bark and react to the other dog. They correct him and he becomes worse. So they pop on the prong collar and he becomes worse. He escalates. Okay? So now you would say, well, punishing him doesn't work. It just makes it worse. Well, no. You've just negatively reinforced the aggression by applying enough discomfort to magnify the aggression without actually creating a suppression. And that could be a problem caused by two things. You could have an intensity issue, not enough, not hard enough, and that's usually what it is. You could have a timing issue, you're doing it too late, you're doing it when he's at the peak of his arousal, and doesn't matter how hard you do it, you're actually making it worse. Or it could be a tool issue. The tool that you're using to try to punish the dog for this dog is actually activating him, it's not suppressing him. So there's a bunch of potential things that could be going wrong there, but that's an example, and it's the most common one I see of people negatively reinforcing a bad behavior instead of punishing it, even though their intention was to punish it. So you have to understand this, and that's the biggest mistake I see in people trying to correct bad behavior. So management, really important, and we're going to talk about management, especially when it comes to reactive dogs, and then punishment. And we're going to discuss each facet of this this and how you would apply it to the specific behavioral problems we're going to deal with. So, let me talk first about the punishers and how I punish. We've already talked about what a punishment is. How do I punish dogs? There's a variety of ways. Depends on the dog, depends on the sensitivity level of the dog, depends on the behavior of the dog. There's a lot of things it depends on, but I'm going to give you what I do with the various dogs. So, the most important thing, and I put them in the corner, I mark the behavior. No! I let them know that specific behavior is unacceptable. I identify for the dog the behavior that they're doing. So a lot of people, and I'm going to use the pinwheel example. It's my favorite way, it's the favorite analogy that I've seen on this. Okay? This is a pinwheel that's not moving. Okay, you see it? You can see every piece of the pinwheel. There's no confusion about where the pinwheel is and what it looks like. When I mark a behavior correctly, this is how the dog perceives the behavior. He's super clear. That specific thing I just did, when I barked at that dog, that thing I did yielded the no, which yielded the punisher, whatever the punisher happened to be. Now, what most people do is they try to just punish the dog when they're bad, and they don't really effectively mark the behavior. So what the dog gets is he gets that, right? The pinwheel becomes, and in case you don't know what I'm trying to do here, the pinwheel becomes more blurry. He's not quite sure what specific behavior within all the behaviors he was offering when he got corrected got him the punishment. So you might think, oh, he knows. And maybe he does. But also maybe he doesn't. And in many cases, they don't know. And the worse your timing is, so a lot of people, they're way behind the 8 ball. And this is really what their dog is getting. Does that even look like if I didn't tell you that was a pinwheel, would you even know it was? Right? So the dog will be reacting. Then the dog will stop and then they'll punish the dog. I've seen this so many times, right? People's timing is just terrible. And they're very confusing with their punishment. So it creates, when your punishment is off, creates more stress, creates distrust in the dog, creates a lot of things that cause everything to go sideways. The performance and the clarity of the training decrease. If you have a fearful dog, in most cases your reactive dog is insecure and fearful, right? You're making it worse. You're not helping the dog in any way. And that's where the mythology that punishers or punishment makes it hurts your relationship. It doesn't hurt your relationship when it's clear. It hurts your relationship when it's unclear, because then the dog doesn't know what is what. And of course that creates distrust. Okay? My dogs know 100% when they've done something wrong, and they know why they were punished. They trust me 100% because I'm very consistent. I punish the bad, I reward the good, and they're never confused about what is what. A lot of people's dogs are confused. So, the mark, no, identify for the dog the specific behavior that causes you to punish them. Very important, okay? And then you're not going to end up with the messed up pinwheel, which is what most dogs are dealing with when they're trying to figure out why they were punished. Social pressure. So before we talk about physical punishment, let's talk about social pressure. By social punishment, no, right? Body forward, loud noise, getting close to the dog, getting in the dog's face, right? Letting him know, I am upset, right? That is not to be underestimated. That is a very powerful thing, especially if your dog is socially sensitive. Many dogs are. We deal with many dogs here that are physically beasts, extremely strong. I'll give you, the average Mastiff is an excellent example of this. So we're training right now, we have 3 Borbals in training. Okay? Borbal, the African Borbal, South African Borbal. Enormous dogs. I don't think they get much bigger than that. Built out of muscle. Physically, there isn't much you can do to them that they're going to deem aversive. Especially not the average person. Right? You can't do a lot to them physically. But mentally, they tend to be very sensitive dogs. And this is the case with most Mastiffs. So I'll give you an example. I had a lady come in with her bulldog. It was a good size, one of those English bulldogs. Not the little ones, the bigger ones. And the dog was reactive. And the dog would react and she would pop him, but she wouldn't say a word to him. And he would take the pop on the collar, right, on the pinch collar, and he would literally just move a little bit and then bah, 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 keep barking at the other dog. He would constantly, every time he saw a new dog, woo, 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 pop, woo, 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 woo. Didn't stop him. And I said to her, what did we tell you to do? Because this was her second session. Oh, I don't know, I'm popping him. No, that's not what he said. I said, say no. Tell him, let him know you're upset. So the next time he saw a dog, she went, no, and gave him a little pop. And the pop was doing nothing to him. But when she said no, his ears went back and he went like that. Right? And he stopped. He stopped the behavior immediately. And he didn't offer it again for the rest of the session. Just simply putting a little bit of pressure, the little pressure that she put on him, and I would have preferred that she put a lot more, it stopped him in his tracks because mentally he was sensitive, but physically super strong, super powerful. Those little collar pops were doing nothing for him. Okay? So social pressure, for many dogs it's big. Now for some dogs, especially if you're maybe dealing with an older dog that has a bit of a history, it's maybe not such a good idea, right? But I find that about 90% of the dogs we deal with, social pressure is effective. There are, of course, 10%, like I said, maybe they have a history, maybe, they have some rank dominance issues. Social pressure is actually not so helpful. But here's the problem. This is dog training, guys. There are no absolutes. No absolutes. Things can be mostly one way, but then sometimes completely the opposite way. That's dog training in a nutshell. You have to get used to that idea. So social pressure, though, for most of you, very effective. So when I say no, I let the dog know, no! And then when I'm punishing him, don't do that! Even when I'm physically punishing him, I'm putting also the social pressure. I'm making it a very aversive experience from both angles. And he knows I'm upset. There's this myth out there that your dog shouldn't know that you're upset. 100%. My dogs are socially in tune with me. They've been domesticated for thousands of years. They need to be in tune with what you're thinking, how you're feeling. They depend on us for survival, so it makes sense, right? Why wouldn't I use that? Dogs like Border Collies, for instance, extremely socially sensitive. Usually you don't even need the physical. Just the verbal and the social pressure you're applying to the dog is enough to create a suppressive effect in behavior you don't like. So a lot of people really, the mark, no, and the social pressure. Don't be afraid to let your dog know you don't like it. Now, the physical punishers. The prong collar, okay? That's the obvious one, okay? We use the prong collar a lot here, especially in the beginning of the training process, all right? We don't generally go with dogs that use the prong collar for the rest of their lives, but in the beginning of the training process, it's training wheels. We use it to teach the dog a number of things, which you know if you've taken the Elite Off-Leash Obedience course, and we also use it to punish behavior as necessary. So the way that the prong collar works, for those of you that don't know, basically, when you pull it tight, these prongs hinge in on each other, right? Now this one's, of course, a little bit too big for my arm, but you guys get the idea, right? So you can pull it really tight, and you're not going to injure the dog, right? Of course, you're not supposed to be like hanging the dog up or anything like this, but generally the way that most people use it is they pull on it and they keep pulling. and that doesn't work. What that does is it creates discomfort in the dog, right? And it's enough discomfort that usually because they're aroused by something, it makes the problem worse. And we've already talked about that. The way that you should use it is the same way you use it for loose leash walking. And if you haven't watched our loose leash walking course, you must watch it. Don't try to do this unless you've done the loose leash walking. So I'm going to assume you've done the loose leash walking. So remember in loose leash walking, every time your dog pulls you, every time the leash becomes tight, pop until the leash is loose. If he pulls, pop, pop, right? If he pulls, pop right away until the leash is loose. Here's the big thing though with that, guys. Do not preempt. Don't say, well, I know he's going to pull, so let me pop him now. Don't do that. Wait until he pulls, then pop, okay? So I'm going to assume that you've done the loose leash walking. And the reason why this works, what a lot of people do with the prong collar is they pop and they keep the pressure on. And that doesn't work because it basically, the collar hits the dog, but then it stays on. When you pop like this, it's like you're cracking a whip and the collar basically hits the dog in the neck and then the pressure goes away right away. So when you go pop, pop, the pressure hits the dog and then goes away. Hits the dog and then goes away. And it's much more startling. When you do this, you're creating pressure and then you're creating tension. Tension is not generally what we want. We want to startle the dog out of the behavior. The startle is almost more important than the actual physical discomfort that this creates. So, if I have my dog, and let's say he sees something and he wants to react to it, okay? So I see that he sees the other dog. I'm going to wait until he offers the specific behavioral contingency I've deemed to be unacceptable. So let's say he always growls before he goes off. So I'll wait, and then he sees the dog and he goes, no! Big pop. And here's the thing, especially those of you ladies, 120 pounds, 100 pounds, you've got an 80 pound, 90 pound dog. Don't half-ass it. That's what a lot of people do, is they go halfway. They've got this big, strong dog, and the dog just walks through that pop like he's the Terminator. You cannot do that. I want you, as hard as you physically can. No! And you can practice on a tree if you like, or something. And really learn how to properly pop the dog. One good pop beats 100 of these half-ass or poorly applied, things that people do. Here's the other thing. You want the dog to be at a distance. Don't do this when the dog is close to you. You don't have momentum here the same way that you have when you have all 5-6 feet of the leash, right? Whether you're using a pinch collar, you can also do this with a choke chain. It works the same way. Of course, the sensation is somewhat different, but it does work the same way. You don't want to be close for this. You're not going to have as much strength and momentum, and you're not going to startle the dog as much as if you are farther away like this. You can even use two hands, those of you that are smaller, if you're dealing with a very strong dog. No! Right? And you see how fast the pressure comes on and off. It's literally like I'm cracking a whip. It's not. It's, right? Very fast. Again, practice on a post until you get the sensation right. If you do this properly, believe me, about 80% of dogs that we deal with, right? I use the pinch collar in the beginning with them. They react to a couple of dogs or people. No! Mark, social pressure, pop. Very fast. It's all together. The dog, oh! And I see, this is the big thing. What does the dog show you? I say no and I pop him, and he goes like this. That's suppression. Okay, he's showing you behavioral suppression. Oh, it's terrible, huh? The dog, they look so sad. This weird thing that people do when they punish dogs is they don't want the dog to look sad. It's like, of course he should look sad. If he's not looking sad, if he's not showing that this was a bad experience for him, what the heck was the point? You're not achieving anything. This isn't a feel-good thing for you. It's not a feel-good thing for him. It's showing him that his behavior in this specific instance is unacceptable and will yield for him really bad consequences. He should feel like his world is ending. It's terrible. How could you do that? Right? So this is the mistake a lot of people make with punishment, is they go halfway. And even in the moment, if it stops your dog, here's the problem. Here's the mistake a lot of people make with the pinch collar. Right? No. He's half-ass corrections build the dog, right? In the beginning, maybe it's enough to stop him, but now 2 weeks in, that's not stopping him anymore. He's walking through that, he's becoming worse. And now you have to go even more, as opposed to if you had just done it properly in the beginning and blitzed him. When you punish a dog, you want to go over their limit. You want to overpower the behavior and create that instant suppression. That's what a true good punishment does. What most people do is they nag the dog, and in the beginning maybe it surprises the dog and they slow down a little bit, but then you see there's a degrading in the behavior, and then all of a sudden the behavior comes back with a vengeance because they didn't do it enough. They didn't make it severe enough that the dog offered this specific behavior. What you have to understand with a lot of behavioral issues, especially reactivity, there's an element of satisfaction for the dog in offering the behavior. So if you are not creating enough of an aversive consequence for the behavior, of course it's going to come back. And it'll come back even worse if you're applying a little bit of discomfort but not enough to create that suppression. Hope that makes sense. So the prong collar is number one. It's quite easy to use if you use it properly. And you know, I suggest starting out with that for most dogs. Now there are a number of dogs that the prong collar simply doesn't matter how you use it or who's using it, it's not going to be right for that dog. Maybe that dog already has bad experience on the prong collar, or learned to do bad things on the prong collar, or maybe it's a dog who pain activates. So there's a lot of dogs, especially like specific breeds, like you see it in the bullies and the pit bulls, sometimes like the Malinois, the Dutchies, right? You pump them, they actually become worse automatically. That physical discomfort actually activates them and it makes them much worse, right? Huskies too, I see it sometimes in them. Bulldogs a lot, okay? And the prong collar creates so much conflict that it's not productive, right? So the bonker is an excellent second option. And I use this a lot, especially for dogs that are really bad. And the good thing about, here's the other thing quickly for the prong collar. There's a lot of dogs that offer redirection, okay? So if you pop them on the leash, they will redirect. Now, here's the thing. You have to understand, and I've said it before, this is why I said you have to watch this video. There's a big genetic component to a lot of bad behaviors, okay? It's not just the dog learned to be like that. The dog has the genetic proclivity to be like that. So even something like redirecting. I get a lot of clients, they've never corrected the dog in their life, but the dog, just from being held back from not being able to get to another dog, turns around and bites them in the leg or stuff like this. We call this redirection. The dog's not really thinking. The dog's just so aroused that that energy has to go somewhere, and it goes up the leash or it goes into the handler's leg or something like this. The same thing can happen if you're correcting the dog. You correct the dog and he turns around and he tries to bite you. Now, in this case, would you say that the punishment worked? No, you would say, well, I accidentally negatively reinforced handler aggression, okay? So what's the solution? A lot of people say, well, that proves it doesn't work. No, it just proves that now you need to, and sometimes the dogs have learned this. They've learned to be bratty. They've learned that they can turn around and nip at the handler and make the handler stop. Just as you're trying to train the dog, they will try to train you, right? So, of course, you must punish this as well. Now, the bonker, I like the bonker because it generally doesn't create any redirection, okay? Dog's much less likely to redirect on the bonker. So if you have a dog who's very prone to redirecting and biting at you or nipping at the leash, the bonker is an excellent option. Now for me, the bonker is the strongest punisher that I ever really use, right? From a mental standpoint, from the dog standpoint, right? Of course, there's physically more harsh things. This is on the scale of harsh physically, this is the lowest because it doesn't hurt. There's no physical problem with this, right? What it is mental. And the mental war is where you actually win or lose the battle with the bad behavior and the good behavior. If you can control the dog mentally, that's it, right? Physical control is not the same as mental control. And this thing is a game changer from a mental standpoint. So I'll use this a lot with dogs that have problems with the leash already. They're not having a good reaction on the prong collar. Specific breeds, like for me, Rottweilers, Pit Bulls, stuff like this, especially when we're dealing with dog aggression, this is my go-to in the beginning. I don't stay with this for the rest of the dog's life, but this is my go-to in the beginning. Also for dogs that fight in the house, I like to use this a lot because, of course, the dogs in the house, sometimes they're not wearing any tools. So you need to have something that you can basically hit the factory reset button on the dog. So this is fantastic. Now the way that you use it, again, let the dog know I don't like the behavior. So let's say my dog is that black bed over there, okay? I'm going to identify for the dog. Let's say he, I don't know, let's say he goes to the window and he's barking out the window, okay? I'll identify, no! And I'll throw the bonker right at the dog, okay? And I will aim for the shoulder or for the head. And there's a reason for that. Everything we do is for a reason. The reason I will aim for the shoulder or for the head is because I'm trying to create a flinch reflex in the dog. Dogs are very sensitive, and a lot of animals are very sensitive to things coming out of their peripheral vision. The mistake a lot of people make with tools like this, there's various iterations of this, right? The mistake a lot of people make with tools like this is they say, well, let me, again, it's people being squeamish, right? Let me go with the least, let me go with the least aversive way to get this done. So they'll say, no, they'll shake it. And maybe the dog will be scared by the noise in the beginning. But again, like all things, when it comes to being squeamish with punishing your dog, it might work in the beginning, but I guarantee you after a little bit, it's not gonna work anymore. And you see this a lot, right? Where people, again, in the beginning, that noise, oh, I just made a noise, it didn't even hurt him, he wasn't even all that scared, and he stopped. Yeah, okay, he stopped now. Will he continue to stop? No, because he's gonna become desensitized to the noise. When you punish the dog, more is usually better. Okay? And I'll talk about the exceptions to this. So, mark no, and I throw this at the dog, shoulder or head. It creates a flinch reflex. Usually he catches it coming out of his peripheral vision, or even if he doesn't catch it, the sensation of it hitting him and then the loud noise of the pebbles inside the, what is this? This is a all-purpose cleaner, okay? Some size like this, right? With just a few pebbles or some marbles, it makes quite a racket, right? That noise, the sensation of it hitting him, it's all very scary. It completely startles them out of the behavior, okay? So, when you use this, this is how you use it. Of course, you can use it at a distance. No, and then throw it. The other great thing is you can be late, okay? And this applies actually to the prong collar corrections too. I forgot to mention this, so I'll take a quick step back and mention this. When you mark, you can be late, as long as you marked on time. So let's say I saw him over there, he did something bad. I said no when he did a bad thing, but my bonker was sitting over there. So I had to walk over, grab my bonker, and throw it at him. Or even he ran away and I had to go find him and throw it at him. Right? That, he would still understand why it happened, and he would understand the reason for the punishment. And I was late with the delivery of the punishment. Same thing with the pinch collar. Let's say he's wearing the prong collar and he does something bad, he's barking in the window. I say no, I walk up to him at the window and I pop him on the collar even when he stopped barking. He knows why he got it, because he heard the mark at the time of the transgression, of the behavior that we find undesirable. Now here's the thing with the bonker. Okay, I think there was a trainer on YouTube, he got in a little bit of trouble because he posted a video and he uses a rolled up towel. A lot of people with the bonkers, they use rolled up towel. I don't use rolled up towel because rolled up towels don't make noise. And they're actually heavier than this. So if you're dealing with a small dog, it could cause maybe even an injury if it catches the dog in the wrong way, like a really small dog. I'll use this because they're weightless, they make noise, so it's even better. Right? And of course it's in my opinion easier than having a rolled up towel all the time, just to have one of these or a bunch of these around. Okay? You must pre-bonk the dog if you're dealing with a strong dog who has an aggression problem. And by pre-bonk I mean you must bonk him for no reason. And this is what really gets a lot of people. And this trainer, he posted some videos on YouTube of himself doing this with a dog. We don't know the context, we don't know what the dog was doing, why he was pre-bonking the dog. He made the mistake of allowing someone to video that, and of course he got dragged through the mud for it. But the reason why you pre-bonk the dog is because when a dog is in a high state of arousal, punishments have much less impact. But when you pre-program the dog to respond to the mark of no with that suppression, it has much more impact, and it can work even when the dog is in a high state of arousal. So high states of arousal, your dog's lunging and barking, he's in a high state of arousal. He's fighting with another dog, he's in a high state of arousal. If you want any hope, and listen, in my opinion, if you're punishing at that point, you've already kind of failed because you should have stopped the problem before it started. But realistically, not everybody's always on point. Sometimes you miss stuff. You can miss the prerequisites to the behavior, your dog ramping up to the bad behavior. Maybe you missed it. And your only choice is to punish the dog at the height of the bad behavior. Well, the bonker is the way to do it, but you must pre-program it. So the way that you pre-program the bonker is I'll usually, if I had my dog on the leash, I'll just walk him around. I won't say anything to him. I will let him just kind of explore, smell the ground, whatever. I'll wait till he's not looking at me, of course, and then I'll bark, no! And I'll throw the bonker at him. And again, I'll throw it quite firmly. It's gonna make a straight line from my hand all the way to his shoulder, to his head. And one of two things is gonna happen. In the case of a really strong dog, he might act like a Terminator taking a bullet, right? What's that? Or in the case of a maybe not so strong dog or a sensitive dog, they're going to suppress completely. You know, they're going to even try to run away a little bit. I'll act like nothing happened. I'll just go and pick up the bonker without shaking it. I'll just pick it up and I'll just walk and act like nothing happened. Now, if the dog showed me a suppression, good enough. I'll consider the dog pre-bonked. If the dog did not react very well to this bonker, like he barely showed anything, then what I'll do is again, I'll wait till he's distracted. No! And again, I'll throw it. And I'll do this, and with some dogs, I've had to pre-bonk them 3-4 times to really get the point across that they must, not that they must, to get that suppression response. Okay, I'm trying to create an unconscious response. When he hears no, I want to see that suppression, right, in the behavior, because that's what's going to save me when he becomes hyper aroused and aggressive or whatever my problem is. Now, again, I mentioned I like to do this for dogs that have a really strong and maybe dangerous behavior. Maybe if you're very physically small and your dog is quite big, you can use this for reactivity. You can use this for a wide variety of things. I don't generally use this for small stuff, like he's going on the counter. I generally use this for big stuff, okay? Here's the other thing. This is why we use marks, okay? And again, I know I'm taking a while, but listen, if we want to talk about punishment, we must talk about it properly. Like I said, this is going to be the most detailed video you've ever seen on how to properly punish your dog for a variety of things. You need, like I've said before, you need to mark and you need to not threaten. A lot of people say, well, I got the bonker, you got to be good. It doesn't matter if I have the bonker. The bonker's over here. And you do something. No! And even if I miss, I've already pre-programmed the dog. I'm gonna get an aversive response from the dog. I'm gonna get that suppression response. And he's gonna learn, I don't need to have this thing in my hand to make you stop doing what it is that you're doing. A lot of people make it about the tool. And this is the thing, none of these things, prong, bonker, slip lead, leash, electric, there's no magic bullet. There is none. Get this out of your head. It's not about what you use, it's how you use it. It's about your timing. And that's why I'm going to say, I'm not telling you guys to do any of this stuff, because some of you will not have the skill, the timing, the will to do this stuff properly. In which case, you must find a professional to work with that knows how to deal with these problems. So, that's the prong, that's the bonker. Now let's talk about the slip lead, okay? So for me, the slip lead, some people call these dominant dog collars. It's basically a paracord, okay? I've seen them made out of other things, from PVC, plastic, to various other materials. Basically, it's a slip lead, okay, with a stopper and 2 rings. So this goes around the top of the dog's neck, and the stopper goes down to hold it at the top of the dog's neck so it doesn't slip down the dog's neck. These only work when they're at the top of the dog's neck, right up under the jawbone. If it is below the jawbone, it will not work. Okay, so if it's like hanging down around the base of your dog's neck, it's useless. You might as well just have a big flat collar on your dog. It's not going to do anything. But if it's properly situated above the dog's jawbone, you can use this now. And the way that you use this is, if your dog's misbehaving, becoming hyper aroused, becoming aggressive, whatever, you pull up smoothly on it until your dog's front feet are off the ground. And if you're using a thin paracord like this, it will immediately, and again, I'm not going to hide anything from you guys, it will immediately cut oxygen. And when it cuts oxygen, there's a saying that goes, no oxygen, no problem. I use this for a number of different types of dogs. This for me is generally a finisher. So if I have a dog who's prone to really intense aggression, which sometimes can escalate to handler aggression, I'll use this because I can always stop him. If I can control his ability to breathe and to receive oxygen to his brain, I can stop him. It doesn't matter how big he is. I can stop him from eating me or trying to eat somebody else or trying to eat another dog. And that's really big. Can you pull the door all the way shut? So it's important, guys, when you're using this is not generally my go-to in the beginning. Once a dog already knows everything, I'll usually use this in concert with the e-collar. So the e-collar will be for obedience, and this will be my ace in the hole, so to speak. So if he loses it, I can immediately hold him up. This is also used, I use the slip lead for dogs that bite the handler. So there's a lot of dogs that have learned that biting the handler is the solution to not doing something they don't want to do, right? The handler accidentally taught them this. In some cases, it's just kind of a bit of a bratty behavior. In some cases, it's actually really dangerous, and they've put the handler in hospital. So you see this a lot with the Malinois, with the pit bulls and stuff like this. You know, the handler tried to correct them or make them do something they didn't want to do, and they bit the handler stopped. So of course they learned that the solution is to bite the handler, right? So for me, if the dog comes and tries to bite the handler, right away, no, and you can lift the dog up, and he'll try to get you and all this. You just hold him away from you, and if necessary, I'll spin. And by spinning, that momentum will keep him off my body. You don't want to pull him into you, because if you pull him into you, of course, you could be bitten, right? You hold him away from you, and you wait until he gives up. There'll be a moment, he'll be jumping like an alligator, trying to get you, and then he'll see it. He'll be like, okay, I can't do it anymore, running out of air, can't breathe, can't eat the handler. He stops, and immediately I stop, and of course I immediately make sure that this is completely loose and he can breathe. This is not, again, for like small stuff, that you have like a little sensitive dog and it's barking at other dogs and simply telling it no and giving it a little whack on the nose is enough. This is for monsters that are dangerous, okay, that have put you in the hospital or are trying to put you in the hospital or are showing really dangerous behavior. This is not for like your average dog. But the good thing about it is it creates a suppressive response when used properly because there's no pain. Again, the problem is some dogs are bred with pain activation. So stuff like the pinch collar or the electric make them more. It's like pouring gas on a fire. And they've been bred like that because in their former life, let's say like the American Bulldogs, pit bull, stuff like this, they were originally bred to fight and attack and kill other animals, right? So for them to stop on pain was not considered ideal. Pain should actually be a fuel to the fire. So they specifically bred dogs that I call them pain activation dogs. Pain, physical discomfort, make them more, creates more arousal, not less. For a lot of dogs, if you create enough pain on them, of course they immediately become suppressed. For most people it's like that, but of course you've always, if you've been around, maybe gone to some fighting gyms and stuff, there's some guys, you punch them, they become more. For most guys, you punch them, they become less, right? I happen to be one of the latter. So, dogs are no different. There are specific breeds of dogs, they're pain activation dogs, especially when they're already in a state of arousal. This takes them out of that. They become aroused, you lift him up off his front paws, and you wait until the arousal becomes less, and then you put him down, and you give him the air back. And you always, of course, make sure that this is not tangled with any collars and that he can breathe. This is something that you must use with maximum care and caution. And again, I only use this for dogs that can be a danger generally to the handler. I don't generally use it really for other stuff, because other stuff I find prong collar, bonker, more than enough usually. This is only for dogs where I'm concerned that they might come at me, which is definitely a side effect of correcting some dogs, or some dogs already have that history. So, dominant dog collar, slip lead, you can make these at home or you can buy them, okay? The other option for some people, the choke chain. Now the choke chain is kind of like a mixture between the prong collar and the slip lead. You can pop on it, right, because it's a little bit thicker. I don't like to pop on the slip lead ever. I don't ever really pop on it. I'll just use it to basically lift the dog up if he overreacts or tries to come for me. The prong collar is what I use. The choke chain can be kind of a hybrid where you can give it a pop and you're not obviously concerned that it could cause any trachea damage. Though there has been studies, and again, we must disclose these things. I don't really use these very much, but there has been studies that over a period of time, this can cause bruising and scar tissue to the neck of the dog. Now, of course, I don't know how they were used on those dogs. I don't know, we don't know any of this stuff. It's from an old study I remember reading a long, long time ago. Versus the pinch collar that really doesn't actually cause any scar tissue or serious injuries to the dog in any way, right? But again, I'm not telling you to do any of this stuff. This is what I do, this is what I know, I'm just telling you about it. So you can use this if you have a dog who's a little bit handler aggressive sometimes, and you can use it both as a pop if necessary or to lift. Just keep in mind, I find that these are a lot less effective than pinch collars when it comes to popping a dog for bad behavior or for the pulling on the leash. But for sure, with some dogs it works. Generally with these, you need a little bit more physical strength than with a pinch collar, and I'm always looking for the option that's the least amount of physical strength. So, and again with these, now there are a number, quick note on this. So there are a number, so you'll see often slip leads like this. Now this isn't going to be very effective with a very serious dog. I would never use this on a dog who, let's say, has put a few handlers in the hospital, right? It's just not thick. It's just too thick. It's not going to be able to really stop anything. This isn't going to be able to stop the dog in any reasonable period of time. So, for instance, I once trained a 100-pound pit bull. His name was Grizzo, and he, when you would put pressure on him to do stuff like heeling, tap him on the e-collar or whatever, even if it wasn't particularly high, if it was like low, medium, he had no problem coming up and trying to bite you about it. So I had one of these on Grizzo, right? And you can see Grizzo in videos, by the way. I think it's called Off-Leash Trained Pit Bull or something. It's from a couple of years ago. I have him off-leash next to me in the city because that's the end result. Because believe it or not, when I trained him and I showed him it's not possible to bite me without serious consequences to you, he actually trusted me and liked me. Right? Because I showed him there's rules, there's boundaries, there's limitations, and there's also rewards. That's trust. So, I was making him do the heeling, and I was ready, because I knew at some point, right? Heel, and we're walking, and I tapped him for getting a little bit too far out on me. He came, whoa, right away, and I pulled him up, and I just kept him out, and I kept him out, and I kept him out until he softened up and he went relaxed. I immediately came off the leash, and that was the last time Grizzo ever tried to bite me. Okay? So that's an excellent example of how you would use that. And ideally, again, less is more. When I punish a dog, I don't want to keep punishing them. I want to punish them once, twice, and then we're done. And hopefully I don't have to repeat that lesson too many times. So slip lead, bonker, prong, leash. Let's talk about the leash. Now, a lot of people have this wonderful thing called a leash. Now, if I have a leash, okay? Sorry guys, this doesn't want to hook up there, so I'm just going to put it like this. Okay, so if I have a leash and I'm walking my dog, guess what else I have? Now this leash happens to have a brass ring. It doesn't particularly matter one way or the other. I have the other end of the leash, right? Oh, it's terrible, Hez. You mean you swat him on the nose with the leash? Yes, I do. Remember, the whole concept of a punishment is to be terrible. But here's the thing. We never ever want to injure the dog. I don't mind causing physical discomfort or mental discomfort. In fact, it has to be there in order for it to work. Otherwise, it won't work, right? I will use the other end of the leash for some dogs. Again, depends on the dog. You have to know the dog that you're dealing with, how he's likely to respond. And if you see a bad response for some dogs, right? No tools on the dog. He misbehaves. No! And you just catch him across the nose or something. Oh, and you'll see that suppression, right? This is the thing, right? I say this because this is something you always have. Sometimes for a lot of bratty dogs, they try to bite the leash or they try to bite you. No! Pop! And you just catch him, right? Not a little one, catch him, right? this is not going to physically injure the dog because it's a soft thing. It's not like you're beating him with a metal rod, right? If you don't like the brass ring, you could take the brass ring off. Some leashes have these brass rings, and it's actually so that you can hook the other end of the leash to it. But this works quite effectively, okay, if you don't have any tools on the dog. You can always punish a dog, right? Now, the leash is something that you can use, just the other end of the leash, mark no, and whack the dog with it. And again, always be careful, never beat around the eyes. Always, you know, ideally the nose or maybe like the head area of the dog. It'll have an impact. Again, it's not so much the actual hitting, it's the peripheral vision, and then just not expecting something to make contact with them, and then and you see that suppression, that startle of the dog, and it has an impact. It cuts the behavior, and then it gives you a chance to give the dog other information. So the leash is one, and then electric. A lot of people use for punishment right off the hop because it's the easiest one, right? You get to feel so good about it. I didn't hit my dog. I don't personally, it doesn't matter if you hit your dog or you use the electric, right? At the end of the day, a punishment's a punishment. The dog either perceived it as aversive or not. Here's the thing, and this is again a disclosure, and I think I have to put a watermark at the bottom of this. Do not do this stuff with the intent to injure your dog. Don't do this stuff out of frustration and anger. You do this stuff only to surgically address bad behavior. You are like a vet. You are going to create some trauma mentally, okay, to fix the problem, okay? Mental trauma exists for a reason, right? So a vet, for instance, creates physical trauma to fix a problem for the greater good of the dog, right? So they jam metal needles into your dog, physical trauma. They cut your dog open. They cut parts off your dog, all in the name of the greater good of your dog. And you even go to them and pay them to do this, okay? You as a dog trainer is no different. I need to make sure that this dog doesn't get put down. I need to make sure that this dog doesn't get given up. I need to make sure that this dog has the best life I possibly can make for him. So I need to apply some short-term trauma to get a long-term benefit. And maybe the word trauma isn't such a good word because people have, again, emotional conniptions about it. But it's a good, I want you guys to understand why you do this stuff. It's not about being mean. It's not about being a tough guy, right? It's just simply about giving the dog the information that he needs and the consequences that he needs, both good and bad, in order to function at the level that, the highest level that he's capable of functioning, so he can have the best life he can have, and you guys can hopefully live together in harmony and peace and happiness as much as possible. So back to the topic at hand, the electric. I don't like using it for punishment. It is, for me, generally, a lot of dogs, I will not punish them, especially in the beginning. So if you've taken my elite course, make sure you get all the way through the elite course, at least 4 or 5 weeks, before you ever consider using the electric for punishment. I'm going to talk about some things that it's good for, though. The electric is good to punish the dog for, I like to use it for like small annoying habits. So you get some dogs, you put them on their place bed and they sit there and they whine, right? And there's some dogs, again, it's genetic proclivity. They just, especially German Shepherds, seems a lot of them have this problem. They just sit there and they're, and they just whine, or they whine in the crate a lot. Maybe in the car they whine a lot. So I'll just simply say no, and then tap the dog, and then every time he whines thereafter, I'll tap him again. Generally, it's not on a particularly high level. It's just enough that it's uncomfortable and the dog stops. For some dogs, once I've done all the conditioning and I've punished them in other ways, maybe with the bonker, with the leash, with the prong, whatever, okay, then at that point the dog already understands the no, and I can use the e-collar to punctuate my no. Like, let's say if I have a reactive dog and he's been doing really good, but one day on a walk, out of nowhere, he just reacts, no, stop, and I can catch him on the electric. And because I've already done all that pre-work with the dog, I've conditioned him properly to the electric, I've created a compliant mindset in the dog, and I've also done punishments with other methods. Now it works very well. And that's the other thing I wanted to tell you guys about quickly. Don't be limited. Don't say, well, I cannot punish my dog unless I have a bonker, a slip, a leash, electric, a prong, whatever. Don't be limited. My dogs know I can punish them with my bare hands if necessary. They know I can reward them with my bare hands if necessary. Don't be limited. And there's a lot of people in dog training, they make it about tools, they make it about treats, they make it about things that aren't them. Those things, treats, tools, these are things that assist you. They supercharge your training. But at the end of the day, it's all here. And if you don't understand that, if you don't understand why your dog does what they do, why your dog responds the way that he or she responds, you are not going to have success. You're going to have temporary success based on a specific tool, but the second the tool is gone, you're SOL, right? Don't be that way. So understand what I'm trying to say to you. I'm not saying that these don't help a lot. I'm not saying that one of these, like a bonker, might not be a game changer for you. 100% it will be, but don't limit yourself. So in the beginning, for instance, if I have a really nasty pit bull, he likes to go after other dogs, and I spent like a week or two teaching him to walk on a loose leash and I bonked him. Then later on, I can move to something else because I've already created now in his brain a pathway from no to suppression in that behavior. There's already a pathway there. So now if I later on I say no and I give him a little whack on the side of the head with my bare hand because I don't have anything, you're going to see that same impact because I've already created the pathway in his brain between no and suppression. Okay? So it's really important. Now, here's the thing, guys, with punishers. Once you've done it and you've created a radical change in the dog's behavior, be careful. And what I say by be careful is don't fall into you say no and you always punish. That's in the beginning, yes? But then after that, normally when I have a dog who's 99% good and occasionally he screws up, if I say no and he stops, I stop. I will not punish him. Now, of course, if I see, okay, let's say he's been really good. He reacts to a dog. I say no, and he stops. But then the next time he sees a dog, he goes to do it again. Okay, I gotta go back and punish him. But once your dog has changed his or her behavior, give them a chance. Dogs, like human beings, will have moments of failure from time to time, even if they are able to string together a really good baseline. The idea in the beginning is to create a new baseline. So you've got a really crappy baseline. This is your baseline. But you work hard, you do the elite off-leash obedience, and you punish the bad behavior, and you're able to make a nice new baseline. But occasionally, you have a fail, okay? Very occasionally. You can warn him here as long as you don't see the behavior degenerating further, okay? So give your dog some space once they're able to establish a new baseline. That space that you give your dog will create trust. Of course, don't give them too much space that they completely revert, all right? So, prong collar, bonker, slip lead, leash, electric. Now, how does this all relate to reactive, and I'm gonna show you guys hopefully some videos soon on how I deal with physically actually dealing with the reactive cases. You are going to, with your reactive dog, I'm going to tell you this right now, you are going to focus on the loose leash walking. Your loose leash walking must be mint, must be perfect, okay? If your loose leash walking has any holes, oh yeah, it has, it's great. And then they show me that their dog loose leash walks and the leash looks like this, and they have to do this with the leash. Oh, it's only when other dogs are around. Well, then he's not loose leash walking, is he? Right? This is loose leash walking. The leash has a dip in it. Doesn't have to be like a dip like this, but there's some dip, and you can hold the leash with 2 fingers, okay? I don't care if there's another dog around. So normally what will happen with the loose leash walking is the dog will actually pull towards the other dog, and that's your first chance to really correct him. And of course, the way that you're going to correct him for pulling towards the other dog is much more significant than you would just correct him for maybe pulling to go smell a post, because he's going to be in a higher state of arousal. Here's the other thing you have to understand. And I know I've been talking a while, and I probably lost some of you, but that's okay. This is a complex topic, and I have to be complex when I explain it, because like I said, there's no absolutes in dog training. I'm just trying to give you all the information I can give you about how to deal with this type of stuff. When your dog is aroused, it's much more difficult for him to process new information, and it's much more difficult for him to make good decisions. Just like children, the more aroused they are, the more likely they are to injure themselves, injure someone else, do something that maybe they wouldn't normally do were they in a more stable state of mind. Your dog is no different. So you need the ability to keep your dog from becoming aroused. The loose leash walking keeps your dog's arousal level from here and puts it down here. If you can't pull on the leash, he has to concentrate on not pulling on the leash. He has to think to himself, okay, handler's back there, right? I can only go so far. If I pull, there's going to be a consequence. And dogs suck at multitasking. So when you give them a job to do, something so simple like, hey dude, I don't care, just don't pull me on the leash. The second you pull me on the leash, the second you make this leash tight, there's a consequence, right? If you're at the part in the training where you're using the e-collar, it's the same thing. So the dog pulls, and you're just, boom, you're tapping the e-collar until he stops pulling, right? Just giving them that job alone removes like 95% of their power. Most dogs at that point will stop, okay? Now, I've talked to you guys about how I physically punish a dog. I've talked a little bit about management, and both those things come together when addressing the reactive dog, all right? And the reactive cases, the best way is number one, stop allowing strange people and strange dogs to interact with your dog, okay? That's making the situation much worse. Stop allowing that. Number two, make your dog walk on a loose leash. If you do nothing else, make your dog walk on a loose leash and be militant about it. I don't care what's going on. You must not pull me. Number three, establish a play-based relationship with your dog. And number four, again, and I'm going to repeat this rule, stop allowing strange people to touch your dog. And the rules, and for me with reactive cases, the deal I make is this: I won't let strange people and strange dogs mess with you. On the flip side, I expect you to behave yourself. And if you don't do that, there is a severe consequence. And I let him know, this is wrong, don't do it, don't be reactive. And with reactive cases, remember, it's fear. So at some point, if you do this properly, very quickly, the dog's gonna say, okay, well, I can't pull. And in many cases, just removing the pulling, you will remove the reactivity. But if you don't, and he reacts, and you say no, and you give him a big correction, it's really important to put him back in that situation again. Even if it's with another dog, because you can't bring past that same one again, put him in the situation again, and let him figure it out so he understands. I will not stop you from doing this, but if you do it, there is a consequence, right? It's not about prevention. A lot of people try to hide their reactive dog. They try to say, no, 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 sit, 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 look at me, and then they put their body between the dog and all this nonsense. They cross the road. I don't cross the road. Of course, I give reasonable amount of space. The other thing I don't do is if my dog's next to me, I'll actually say, break, go, get away from me. I want all 6 foot of leash. I want the dog to feel like he's not even on a leash, to have a choice. And then if he makes the wrong choice and he lunges or any of that stuff, no. And I let him know it's not acceptable, don't do it. And then I put him in the situation again, and usually what you'll see is if you've done this within 2 reps, the dog will be insecure, and he'll look at you and he'll look at the other dog, and I'll say, yeah, it's okay. And then when he doesn't do something, when he really tries, you'll see the try in him. He'll try to control himself, and he'll pass the other dog and say, good boy, that's such a good job. And we'll keep working on that until I can play around the other dog, right? So ultimately with the reactive cases, what I want to be able to do with them is I want to be able to play ball or whatever it is, give him treats around the other dog, but not to hide him from it, to reward him for making good choices. The mistake people make in dog training is they don't put enough responsibility on the dog. I give him all the responsibility. You're loose leash, dude. You got 6 foot of leash. Do with it what you want. But if you make a bad choice, there's a consequence. If you make a good choice, there's also a consequence. And by putting them in that situation enough times, they learn, number one, even if the other dog is reacting towards me and I don't react towards him, nothing bad happens. If I react towards him, something bad happens. So the mistake a lot of people make is they don't even let their dog look at the other dog, and their dog starts to believe that just the presence of the other dog being close to them yields the punishment. When I teach my dogs very clearly, your behavior determines the consequences that you face, whether they be good or bad. So, with the reactive cases, loose leash walking, all right, you must complete all the other elite off-leash obedience training that we talked about, and you must punish the behavior 100%. And we do this right away. We don't hide the dogs here. Of course, we don't make them like this close to another dog right away, but we definitely get them to that point relatively quickly. Because look, this isn't a huge training area. And oftentimes we'll have 4 or 5 dogs in here, okay? And like half of those dogs are reactive because half the dogs we get here are reactive, all right? And they learn really quick, like day 3, don't behave like this around me. It's just that simple. So I hope this helps you guys. And there'll be more videos on this topic and others to come.